Fire Emblem Three Houses is the name of the game, but it all sounds a little needlessly bougie if you ask me. I mean, who honestly needs to own 3 houses? Houses shouldn't be viewed as something like an asset to be hoarded by those on the top and the rich, only to build up more and more money so they can acquire more houses. There should be an inherent right to life itself and every single... So, Fire Emblem is a series of turn-based strategy games that, for the most part, no one in the West has really ever heard of, outside of Super Smash Bros. Roy's our boy. However, that was until the release of Fire Emblem Awakening, which saw a resurgence in the series and got massive attention in the West because it was really, really good. Then you also had the release of Fire Emblem Fates, which again got a lot of attention even if it wasn't as good, but now it just means that everyone also knows what a Fire Emblem is. Anyway, with the Nintendo Switch comes the newest release of the Fire Emblem series, and a return to console gaming with Fire Emblem Three Houses, which pits you in a world where an entire continent is divided into 3 unique nations, and they're all sort of unified under a centralized church called Garruk Mok, or something along those lines. And you get to decide which one of these houses you basically follow the story of, and they will have a unique story for you to play through.
But you see, Garruk Mok, the church, is also a school, and it just so happens that the next heads of each house are attending. And it just so happens that you're the new teacher. The silent, never speaking, blank-faced teacher.
Professor.
You have a gut, Professor.
I do hope you can manage, Professor.
But what sort of lessons do these students learn at such an institute? Well, you know, maths, history, PPE, probably. Also murder.
You see, class, it's a lot easier to kill someone when you shoot them in the head. Oh, I see.
Yes, this school seemingly primarily teaches its students in the art of war. Not that one. Such as how to wield a blade, fire a bow, conjure dark magic, or ride a horse. This all highlights one half of the game, your time as a teacher in the school. Week to week, you are a teacher. You'll teach lessons and decide what your students study and where they focus their growth. This means you have full control over how your students develop and what classes they become. If you wanted, you could turn Hubert into an armoured knight instead of a mage like he's set out to be. I don't know why you would, but you could, which is important, I guess. As while, yes, Edelgard will one day rule a nation, she also needs to know how to smash a fool to death with a big axe.
The game isn't just the horrors of the 9 till 5, however. You do get 1 day off each week of free time, basically, which means that you can do whatever you want. Whatever I want. As long as that's fishing, gardening, talking to other faculty members and students. Whoops. The main focus, however, is that you can then boost your own stats from other faculty members by giving you some sort of training, and you can try and woo other members of other classes to your side in, well, the weirdest case of international desertion you might be able to think of. However, these work really, really well to punctuate the combat sequences, like in Persona 5, for example. And it just means that you actually look forward to each one of these days off because you've got something that you're kind of dedicated and desperate to get done. And because you have such a limited number of actions each day off, it means that how you go about doing these actions means there's this constant time limit, and you always feel like you're on the back foot, that you might not finally be able to actually get Felix onto your side, no matter how much you dedicate to trying to woo him. This alongside other maintenance you've got to do, say weapon maintenance and making sure everyone's gotten like food and everyone's like amped to go to your classes means that there's always something to do, and these bits are genuinely really interesting. That is until later in the game, because unlike Persona 5, which manages to keep this element of here's your free time throughout the entire game, Fire Emblem Three Houses kind of dries up and these moments become boring. Because you see, you've already recruited everyone you possibly could to your party, and then it just becomes a case of just ticking boxes to fill stats and boost stats for your allies, except for by that point they're already level S rank and everything in all their respective stats that you need them to be, and they're already their top warrior class that you could possibly get them to, so the entire thing is kind of pointless and it just doesn't serve any purpose other than a sense of killing time. It is very telling that when the game shows you what other people did during these segments, as the game goes on and on and on and further, the number of people who just skipped it, didn't do anything with time, and just skipped it, increases more and more. Because these moments just become a pointless activity that just gets in the way of the game progressing, and it slows the experience down. Because fights are still fights and they're still interesting. Your free time is nothing and meaningless and pointless at this point, and it is a major flaw of the game.
Speaking of combat, it's good. It's your classic turn-based strategy thing you may be familiar with from Fire Emblem games. Select a unit, walk them up to an enemy unit, the brutality of war unfolds before them as children spill the blood of their foes and leave an empty hole in the families across the continent as yet another flame is snuffed out.
I had to do it. Don't hate me.
It's great. Everyone has their own levels of movement which varies depending on what job they have, so those on horseback can move further than those on foot. Back. Not to mention you have ranged units and melee units, and it all rapidly boils down to trying to position your strong shields to the front while keeping your ranged squishies out of harm's way, while still managing to murder someone every now and then. You move all your units, the enemy moves all their units, the cycle continues, and you quickly find yourself on the back foot by a surprise attack from the enemy, and suddenly someone will die. And in Fire Emblem games, this normally means that they're dead for good, their mortal life snuffed out, this poor, innocent child destroyed. Which would normally mean a frustrating restart of the level, and it can all get a little bit frustrating, unless you play on casual mode and permanent death is turned off.
However, in Three Houses you also have the However, in Fire Emblem Three Houses you also have the Divine Dragon Pulse, which is a special ability which allows you to turn back the clock, like however many rounds you want in combat, to kind of have another go at a turn, essentially to reset some things. So if someone does die unexpectedly, you can just turn back the clock and have another go, and it's great. Another unique thing with the new one is the battalion system and giant monster system. The former provide a wide variety of different abilities, such as being able to heal in a wide area, or increasing your movement speed, or devastating charge attacks that mean that when you pull them off, your opponent doesn't get a chance to counterattack, which are vital for dealing with these large enemies that have numerous health bars and devastating attacks, unless they're stunned, in which case they no longer attack whenever you attack them, and then you stun them by using the battalions to attack them. And they're kind of really interesting challenges to deal with whilst you're trying to like juggle the enemy's attention to make sure it attacks the right person whilst also being able to deal enough damage to kill it and stun it. But also really annoying at the same time. Again, it's an issue with the late game and near the end of the game, where instead of them being these sort of singular large boss monsters, there's like 10 on the battlefield and you've got to kill them all, and it's really annoying because they'll have like 150 HP divided over 3 health bars, and your character could easily do 150 damage in a single hit, but their health bars don't bleed over. So you're only doing 50 damage at a go, basically, which means you have to do 3 attacks to them each go, and they just become these such annoying, slow processes to deal with that feel less like challenges and more like a speed bump to the game. Big speed bumps. Really annoyingly huge speed bumps. But it's all fine because there is another main focus of the combat. Come closer and I'll tell you. Closer. Closer. Friendship.
Yes, in Fire Emblem you'll once again find yourself trying to make everyone the best of friends. When your units fight side by side or eat meals together, they'll slowly become better friends. And you'll get some form of support scene between the two. Outside of giving these characters, well, character and a background, this then means that during combat, if they're fighting alongside their good friends, they'll get a bonus to all sorts of things. But obviously the main thing is to find out more about your units and witness some truly great stories, as well as realizing how well 2 units go together, even if they are vastly different in style.
Commander, we've got enemy reinforcements coming from the rear. You need to do something. Have Ferdinand deal with him on his horse. And you know what? Give Sylvain for backup. And don't let the two get separated. But Commander, Sylvain's a slow, heavy armored unit. He's just gonna hold Ferdinand back. He doesn't have the mobility. What could possibly... Kissing. I'm sorry? Kissing.
Let's briefly ignore the fact that you're a teacher potentially wooing one of your prospective students and the bizarre power dynamics that make this 100% not okay. For everyone else, could be kissing. Well, not in this game. Unlike Awakening and Fates, you don't spend several hours being some kind of fantasy Cilla Black trying to perfectly marry everyone off to produce spawn. Instead, you just get to enjoy everyone's burgeoning friendships. Dorothea being an icon to women everywhere, telling her friends to be strong and independent. Lindharp somehow cutting to the point of all matters and being a nice guy despite being a bit cold. Or Hubert being Hubert.
I don't envy you.
Sure, some will turn out to be horrifically boring, like Casper, or actually terrible, like Sylvain. But it's these backstories and side stories that add so much to the Fire Emblem experience, and also drives you to make your units hang out when they're murdering everyone, even if it doesn't make much sense for your sword users to be on the backline next to your archers. And it's this focus on character interactions that almost hold up the Fire Emblem games these days. Sure, the tactical combat is fun and interesting, but it's getting to know this litany of characters that really pulls you in and gets you attached to them, which makes it all the more devastating when they eventually perish by having a sword plunged through their jaw. In Fire Emblem Three Houses, there's another means of getting to know your characters as well. Tea parties.
I am honored that you invited me. I am ever so grateful. Delicious. Huh?
So, do you ever find that every single day is ultimately meaningless as you slave away trying to achieve your goals and just begin to wonder as you never actually ever reach and never get closer to your ambitions, so it might finally be time to give up and just become a teacher? Fire Emblem Three Houses is really actually quite good. The story it presents and the characters involved are so great and interesting and unique, with their own interesting story paths and messages behind them, that it sparks genuine discussion and some level of reflection. Which is why you could very well easily play the game numerous times to see every single story path to get each and every story, because they're, well, interesting. However, due to a lot of the pacing issues I've previously just talked about, this idea might be a little harder to stomach. If you see, Fire Emblem Three Houses in a single playthrough is about 40 to 50 hours. So the idea of playing that 40 to 50 hours again, and then again, and then maybe again, is a horrible monumental task of horror to deal with. Because you see, while the first half of the game is basically the same for each storyline, it's also the half of the game where the bits in the school area are actually fun and interesting and something that you want to get involved with. But then you deal with the second half of the game where all the stories diverge and everything, but half of the game mechanics are boring and tedious and entirely worthless. It just adds this massive issue in replaying it. If the game was half the length, so like a good 25 hours, the idea of playing it over and over again to get all these different characters' stories would be a lot easier to deal with. And that is something I genuinely want to do. The characters are interesting, the stories seem interesting. I want to play this game again. But the idea of playing that through so many times with all the pacing issues and seeing the same opening half over and over doesn't appeal to me that much. Like, don't get me wrong, if you play through Fire Emblem Three Houses once, it is a very solid game. But if you want to play it numerous times for all the endings, you might find yourself losing patience with it sooner or later. Don't get me wrong, Fire Emblem Three Houses is genuinely a very, very good tactics game. It's a very interesting strategy game, adds a whole lot to the Fire Emblem franchise that makes it just kind of good. But as an adult who has sometimes a job to deal with and a life to live, the idea of dedicating several hundred hours of my life to playing the same thing over and over again for the different stories is not fun. Haha! Hello! Thank you for watching my video. It was about Fire Emblem. If you liked the video or Fire Emblem, why don't you let me know in the comment section down below about Fire Emblem. I realise I look more like a sort of court gesture than some sort of army commander noble, but either way, feel free to let me know, as I've already said. Leave a like if you liked it, tell me how much you hated it if you hated it, or check out some of my other stuff, such as this video. It's about... I forgot. Or this video, which is about another video. Or click on my face, and it will let you subscribe on the face orb. Thank you, and goodbye.